Greetings, welcome back to Prophetic Forecast. Now, before we go any further, I just want to remind you quickly that if by the end of this you like this video, actually click like. You can subscribe if you are not subscribed yet, and also share these videos on social media. We want people to see Jesus in these times. March was so full of items that I had to do an update halfway through. So just in case you're someone who kind of comes and goes, you only check in at the beginning of the month, you may have missed one from 2 weeks ago. Just so packed full March was that we had to do an update in the middle of the month. And then, I've got a long list of stuff for you today. There's a lot going on as we get ready for April, which is going to be notable for Easter celebrations. Now, you should know at this point that I'm a big proponent of the separation of church and state. Sometimes, though, that definition gets muddied in as we discuss it, but I really believe that church and state should be separate. With that said, I also accept that there are some gray areas, some areas where the government has maybe overreached itself, maybe where it has gone into the world of topics, or maybe just these topics are found both in a governmental sense and a spiritual sense. Sometimes the state finds itself governing things that are actually anointed by God Himself. So it can be difficult to have some of these discussions at a political level. Easy for those of us, in the rest of America. Easy for those of us in a church. But it can be difficult sometimes for politicians as they're handling some of these topics. Discussions like marriage, obviously. Closures of public places of worship. Gender decisions, things like that can be difficult for a politician while still celebrating the separation of church and state. Now, I'm not saying that each individual needs to hear what all religions have to say. You and I maybe don't have to hear what all religions have to say, but politicians have to take into consideration at least what everyone is saying, what everyone believes, if we follow a separation of church and state. Government powers need to take into consideration. And by taking into consideration what someone believes is not uniting church and state. You're taking into consideration what maybe someone in your constituency says. That isn't bringing in or tearing down a wall of church and state. Separation of church and state doesn't mean that God or religion should be ignored by political powers, but that in governance, no one religion, or not even one or two or three religions, should be the sole focus of what they're taking into consideration. As a Christian who believes in the separation of church and state, I can accept that the leadership within the government has to take into consideration what others believe outside of myself. Again, my point is that separation of church and state doesn't mean that God is way over here and that government is way over here, but that no one focus can be given to a particular religion or denomination. So, in some of these gray areas, you kind of have to look at what other people feel. When silence is completely, when religion is completely silenced, we actually end up tearing down the wall between church and state because our state accepts the religion of atheism. So you can't also just totally push God out of the equation. Just simply means that you have to take into every consideration what people believe within these states. Unfortunately, Congressman Jerry Nadler took us down this very road where he wanted to silence religion completely from a conversation about the Equality Act. A congressman from Florida was using his Bible as his reason why he was personally going to oppose this act. And he was encouraging others to also take that into consideration. This is legal. This is still a separation of church and state. It would have been different if everyone said, oh, well, that's what the Bible says, therefore we have to do it. But this particular congressman is allowed to use the Bible for his personal conscience. However, when he was done, Representative Nadler said this from a microphone: what any religious tradition ascribes as God's will is no concern of this Congress. Now, that's just simply not true. I understand, I think his point is we have a separation of church and state, but again, that doesn't mean that everyone has to be silent about what they individually believe. It is important what any religious tradition ascribes to God's will. And in a separated church and state style, it matters what every religious tradition, and so the Christian should not be silenced just as someone else of another religion should not be silenced. But, of course, within the secular-minded, progressive world that our world has, our culture has, that our politics has, it doesn't silence other religions typically. It doesn't silence, what an Islamic person might believe, a Muslim person might believe, or what an atheist might believe. But when a Christian read from the Bible, boom, they wanted to silence. See, that is actually tearing down the separation of church and state. Separation of church and state says that no one religion should be chosen. However, it also then means, it implies strongly, that no one religion should be ignored or silenced either. Each representative is allowed to vote according to their own conscience. Even if their personal conviction is religious, that is okay, still in a style of government where church and state is separate. What Jerry Nadler said is far more dangerous than what the congressman was saying, even though that's not necessarily how the media is portraying it. They were portraying it as if this congressman went too far by reading from the Bible, but he was actually focused on his personal conscience, and that is what this democracy is built on. And I want you to think back in history about the French during the Revolution. They accepted atheism. They pushed God completely out of governance. They were a church state. And then they went to the other extreme where they completely pushed God out and silenced God and silenced the Bible. And they descended into darkness, and terrible, horrible crimes and sins took place within the French Revolution. And, America's dangerously walking those same steps. And France, in fact, is teetering on those steps as well. A French government official walked that same path as Jerry Nadler. It was French Interior Minister Gerard Darmanin was discussing the issues of compromising politically and he was discussing a specific religion, that you can't compromise within a religious thought. He was discussing this issue as he was speaking about Islam. And he said this in terms of that he no longer wanted to negotiate, here's the quote, with people who refuse to write on a piece of paper that the law of the republic is superior to the law of God. France should really know the results of statements like that. America was founded to stay away from statements like that. And then really you've got these two political leaders making the same type of statement. These officials are rejecting God, silencing God more and more. Now, I'm not saying I believe in Islam. I'm not saying, especially with any kind of extreme Islamic, beliefs. But I'm not a politician. I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor. I'm preaching the Word of God. I can take that stance. Government officials have to be careful when they want to silence a religion, whether it's in France and they're silencing Islam. By the way, he wasn't just silencing Islam. He said that evangelicalism, the Protestant church was a problem. That they had to focus on the problem of evangelicalism. We have to be really careful. Government officials have to be careful when they desire to silence religion, to silence God. We're walking a very dangerous path when we do that. There's some Bible stories where political figures tried to silence God, silence the truth of God. Think about Exodus 5:2. Here's what what Pharaoh says as Moses comes in for the first encounter. Pharaoh responds with this, and Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go." He's saying, I don't believe that. It's just a government official. I don't believe that. I don't want that. So he silenced that. I don't know this God. I'm not going to obey this God. What happened to Egypt? Descended into the plagues. They descended into darkness. Egypt denied God and descended into moral darkness. Look what happened to the Assyrians, years later when they were contending with God. 2 Kings 18, starting at verse 33. The leader of Assyria says this, "Has any of the gods of the nations at all delivered its land from the hand of the king of Assyria?" Verse 34. "Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharim and Hena and Ivah? Indeed, have they delivered Samaria from my hand?" Notice verse 35. "Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their country from my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem from my hand?" Assyria then discovered the ramifications of denying God and descended into darkness and futility and failure. Our country has the ability to still keep church and state separate without censoring religion, without censoring Christianity, without censoring religious traditions even within the halls of Congress. Our country needs to be really careful about accepting the religion of atheism, accepting the religion that God is to be silent, or that religion, especially Christianity, is what they're trying to silence in America, that Christianity has to be silenced. We've got to tread lightly with those ideas. Our nation is right on the precipice of fulfilling the same path that these other nations have. Our nation, our world really, but our nation is on the verge of descending back to its medieval roots. This will happen, of course, as the wound of Revelation 13 heals, right? We'll go back to that kind of a path, that kind of a step. That's what this is really focused on. This is where we're heading. As we silence God and things get worse, we're going to realize, oh, wow, we do need God, but we're not going to give our country to God. We're going to give it to Antichrist. We're heading back to those medieval roots where a church state will rule this nation eventually. Our world will be medieval again, and the woman will ride the beast. So we're going to see, if our nation goes, atheist, it's going to fall apart. We're going to descend into darkness, and then we'll come back with a strong church state. This path is the wrong path. Students of Bible prophecy are not the only ones noticing this. We're not the only ones worried about this. Recently, this month, U.S. soccer star Reggie Cannon, who was playing in Dallas, and he's part of our, just as of last night, I was going to say our Olympic hopefuls, but we lost to Honduras, so our men's team won't be going to the Olympics. But he was playing on the on the qualifying team. And part of the reason that he ended up going to play in Portugal instead of in the United States was because he was desiring his family's safety. He'd been receiving a lot of death threats. His family had been receiving a lot of threats because he had been very vocal about police brutality. And he faced threats, very strong threats. So he decided to leave the United States and he went to go play in Portugal. Now that he's in Portugal, he said this about trying to describe the United States to his teammates. Notice what he said. Explaining to my teammates what is going on in the country is baffling to me. Explaining that the America that I have lived in to those who don't live in America, it feels like I am describing medieval times. It's becoming evident to people outside of Bible prophecy that we're starting to sink back to the dark ages, this terrible time that we were literally built to come out of. Our country was built from the things we learned from the dark ages, and we're descending back. That wound of Revelation 13 is healing, and those dark ages are coming back more and more. Something the dark ages were well known for was the overreaching church forcing itself into the world of politics. And so you've got the secular mind pushing away from God. That's bad news. But you also have the Christian mind pushing the politics to go towards religion, to enforce laws based upon establishing Christianity. This is what the Dark Ages were known for, this overreaching church forcing itself upon the state, the woman riding the beast. Here in March, we saw this other side, this other extreme, taking a strong push forward as well. We had bishops of the European Union calling for a Sunday law. And I have a link down below to the entire statement they made, but here's just a portion of what they said. They said, on this year's annual European Day for a work-free Sunday, the European Sunday Alliance calls on political leaders in Europe to pay more attention to the value of synchronized free time. What a phrase. A day recognized by tradition or custom in most European countries, effectively the Sunday, is essential as a day to disconnect literally and figuratively. Now, we're talking about a whole different thing if they were pushing for each family to decide a day, right? Like a law to where each family could say, this day I'm not going to work. This is my family day. Don't call me. I'm not clocking in. Don't schedule me. This is my family day. We're talking about a whole other issue here, a great issue actually that I would love to see personally, for the government to say, all right, each family can make up their mind. However, under the guise of synchronized free time, this really is a call for a Sunday law, that the government should enforce a day, a specific day, not each family a day, but a specific day, Sunday. It is another sign that things are looking like they're wrapping up quickly. Now, don't lose sight of something they said right here in the middle. A day recognized by tradition or custom. It's religious tradition. It's not religious fact. It's not biblical. It's not scriptural. It's not even traditional for Jews. It's not traditional for Muslims. It's traditional for Christians in those nations. Now, this statement was made on March 3rd of this year, which was the 1700th anniversary of the first Sunday law under the reign of Roman Emperor Constantine. So as Constantine began his push to make people by law keep Sunday holy, the venerable day of the sun, this power was pushing for that as well. These bishops of the European Union were pushing with this statement as well. Please, I encourage you to read the whole statement down below. It's as if you're reading right out of Revelation or right out of the book Great Controversy. It's really important stuff. We humans, we don't need to create a day, by the way, for synchronized free time. In a separated church-state scenario, each individual has that conscience to decide a day if they want a day. But for Christians, of course, we don't need to create a day. God has given us a day of synchronized free time. What this statement's really saying is the world needs a Sabbath. We understand more and more, this world is understanding more and more, we need a Sabbath. God has given us one. God has established a day, sanctified a day, set aside a day for synchronized free time. And nowhere in that statement is any idea at all of God's true Sabbath, but it focuses on the tradition, the custom of man's Sabbath, the one that man has made. Synchronized free time is already a blessing given to us by God. Now, speaking of governments speaking about honoring Sunday, you may have heard the media discussing the Georgia Voting Act of recent. It's been in the news a lot, especially in the last week. Now, if you only listen to the mainstream media, you're only going to hear what they think is important for you to hear. So that's why I always encourage you and my own members, don't get your news completely from whatever extreme you want, whether it's CNN on one side or Newsmax and Fox News on the other side. Don't get your news from the mainstream media. They're only going to tell you the things that they think you want to hear or the things they want you to hear, right? They're not gonna focus on the full truth or the real truth. That's why it's so important to pay attention to prophetic episodes like this, like Prophetic Forecast or Walter Weiss, What's Up, Prof? So important to have this basis of seeing the news in light of Scripture, because while the mainstream media has not been discussing, or while it has been discussing the Georgia Voting Act, it hasn't been discussing this. During a Senate Rules and Administration Committee hearing, a discussion played out concerning why Georgia was going to limit the amount of persons voting, in-person voting, on Sundays in this new act. Senator Chuck Schumer asked that question. Why are we going to limit the amount of in-person voting or registration on Sundays? And I want you to catch what Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith from Mississippi said as she answered the question of Chuck Schumer.
He was wondering why on Sundays Georgia would not participate in an electoral process of gathering signatures of registration and things on Sunday. And I would just like to respond to that. Georgia's a southern state just like Mississippi. I cannot speak for Georgia, but I can speak for Mississippi on why we would never do that on a Sunday or hold an election on a Sunday. This is our currency. This is a dollar bill. This says the United States of America, in God we trust. Etched in stone in the U.S. Senate chamber is in God we trust. When you swore in all of these witnesses, the last thing you said to them in your instructions was, "So help you God." In God's word in Exodus 20:18, it says, "Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy."
Okay, so we're going to have to forgive her for misquoting the reference. The fourth commandment is actually found in Exodus 28 through 11. And I don't know if she misquoted or just misspoke. I know she misquoted, but I don't know if she misspoke or maybe she's never looked it up for herself. It's possible she's never looked it up because, as we know, the whole commandment actually says what? The seventh day, right? She's forgotten the whole seventh day part of it. And she's establishing that this commandment actually gives glory and honor or sanctification to Sunday. But bringing all of these topics that we've started with kind of full circle here, this is where this separation of church and state is non-existent. When it comes to Sundays being given special treatment over other days of the week, when it comes to government decisions, that's not a separation of church and state, right? This is not just her or her family, but this is her saying, this is why a state needs to do it because God said it. And of course, she's getting what God said completely wrong. Why not limit Fridays in honor of for the Muslims? Why not Saturdays for Sabbath-keeping Christians or Jewish people? Now, think this through with me. She's not just saying, hey, less people will be there. She's not saying, well, it's just a matter of fact. People are busy. People are in church. Many people are in church. So it just makes sense to not have as many hours. That's not what she's saying. She's saying that they should limit how many people could show up. In other words, they should be telling people, don't come today to register. Don't come today to vote. You should be in church. You should be busy today. You should be elsewhere. So it's not simply the logical conclusion of, well, people are busy because they're in church, so we're going to shorten the hours, or we're going to, open up registration at 1 p.m. instead of 9 a.m. because people are busy in the mornings on Sunday. She's saying the state should limit the hours because of their desire to keep man's Sabbath holy. Treating Sunday differently is not the effect of their decision. In other words, it's not like the cause is people are choosing not to come, so therefore we will change it. It's the cause of it. The government saying the reason we're going to limit is because you should be busy on Sunday morning. Sunday, according to her, is the Sabbath, right? This is man's Sabbath. Our politicians and many Christians spend so much time arguing about building or not building a wall on the border. And while we're so focused on that, we're just chipping away at the wall that's supposed to be between church and state. So we see both extremes strongly at work in the month of March. We see the secular-minded group saying, silence God, quiet God, there should be no Christianity within this Congress. And then on the other side, we're seeing Christians say, the state should enforce our beliefs and our ways. It's dangerous. These two extremes are working against each other, but they're really on the same side. And quote you've heard me say many times, two wings, same bird. What's really going to help the Sunday law when we get to that point is the model that we've been experiencing for work in 2020. And that's flexible hours, at home working. Being at home to do our work. And more employers are starting to see the benefit in so doing this. Take, for example, Ford. Ford announced in March that they will be allowing 30,000 employees to begin working from home, and that if they so choose and get their direct supervisor's permission, they'll not only be able to allowed to work from home, but choose their hours, flexible hours around their family. Pause there. Great idea. Wonderful idea. If it was only that, great idea. I love it. That's the way it should be. It should be like that. If you want to work from home and you're able to work from home, you're able to flex your schedule around your family and put your family first in your life. Hey, well, of course, God and family, right? But if you want to put more time and energy into your family, that's what our children need. That's what our homes need. It's what our families need. I love it. They've discovered by surveying employees from the last year that not only are people rediscovering their families, but also people feel physically, spiritually, and emotionally healthier and more productive as well. It's actually good for the company. The survey goes on to say that 95% of their employees desire this work model. 95% desire to work at home, flexible hours, and choosing the days they work and choosing the days they don't work. Microsoft also got on board with this when they put out a survey and discovered that 73% of the American workforce, so not just Ford or Microsoft, but 73% of the American workforce want to remain working from home with flexible hours. It didn't start that way, by the way, right? We've got a school on campus, and many parents were begging and pleading, please take my kids. I'm trying to learn. I got to work from home. They're jumping all over me. But as we've adjusted, as we figured things out, as kids have become more used to it and families have become more used to it, we're getting used to working on our couch or working in our pajamas or, whatever. But as we've adjusted, now people are like, wow, this is great. This is exactly what I want. I want to be able to be with my family. I want to, spend time with them. I want to have the energy to hang out with them and have lunch with them and breakfast with them. I don't want to run out the door at 7 a.m., trying to get them all dropped off as I run to work. People are falling in love with the idea of flexible work hours. Do you know what this means? People really want a Sabbath. People want a Sabbath. Our culture is just thirsting for the Sabbath model that God has already given us at the very beginning of the history of our planet. The world really wants a Sabbath. And I can't imagine a world where all signs are pointing, we need a Sabbath, and yet so many are still so defiant to the Sabbath. Both actually defiant, like, no, the Sabbath is done. It has no purpose. It's done away. There was a burden. And also those who are saying, oh, not the Sabbath, but our Sabbath, this Sabbath, Sunday. We're so defiant to what God wants. And yet everything is screaming right now in our culture, in our society, we need a Sabbath. This is exactly why the choice will come down to it. Right? For years, Adventists have been saying it's going to come down to Sunday versus Sabbath, the choice that the world is going to make. And people have laughed at us, but look, it's coming down. Everyone's now saying, we want a day off, we want flexible hours, we want to relax, we want time with our families. It's coming more and more to that pinnacle where Antichrist or Christ, his day or God's day, right? A day that honors man, a day that honors the Creator. It's coming more and more to that pinnacle. The world is about to be led astray. It's so important for us then, Adventist family, for us to be teaching people that what they're looking for is in the Bible. Jesus is the answer. We need to be vigilant in getting people the good news, the truth. But we're finding roadblocks to that as we're trying to proclaim the truth. People are taking a stand more and more defiant against the truth of God's Word. Recently in New Zealand, a church group, an Adventist group, passed out well more than 1 million copies of this book, The National Sunday Law. Now, maybe for a moment I should slow down and be honest with you about my opinion of the book. I'm not a huge fan of the way the book is used. I appreciate the book. I like the book. But I don't personally believe that the book is, that its focus should be the first thing we hand to people. That it should be used evangelistically. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, is that it shouldn't be used in a mass mailer. Because I don't think the book has that intention. I don't believe that that's the focus of the book. The book is more a second thing, a third thing that we give to people, a way to help them fill in the blanks of what we've been studying. I believe that the book's a little too harsh, a little too focused on the Sunday law, and that it's just way over the head of everybody. The secular world and the Sunday keeping world is just like, what's the big deal? Who cares? Like, this is worthless. This is garbage. I think the book is more powerful as a follow-up to studies. That's how I see it. But regardless of what I think, this mass mailing was done in New Zealand, and it received national attention in the news in New Zealand and actually around the world because an anti-junk mail group now is pushing for the book to be categorized as hate speech. Now, many within this group are actually secular-minded, it seems, because they actually want it to be condemned as hate speech. Yes, because it's talking about a Sunday law. That's just their mode, their focus. But their real intention is because of the ecological problem of passing out the book. They say when you pass out a book into the mail, millions and millions of copies around a country, most of those just go in the trash and we're wasting trees and paper. And I do agree we need to be smart about proclaiming the gospel in these days, but we have to remember that the world is quickly changing, that the old ways aren't always working anymore, and we've got to keep up with the times and getting the gospel out. So partly what they're saying is true, but we see the big picture. We know the big picture. This is about silencing the truth. We know who's really behind the group. Satan does not want the truth to get out, especially in these times. All right, we've still got so much more to go. I want to get to our two last main conversations, but sadly, I just need to mention somewhat quickly a couple of main items for you. Modes of travel are becoming more and more unsafe, largely because of human error. A new study, according to AAA, the insurance company, says that since 2015, we know why that year isn't significant, that since 2015, the highways in America have become more dangerous. A 34% rise in vehicle crash-related fatalities has been seen in the last 5 years. So the study from 2015 to 2020 showing that the roads are becoming more and more dangerous. Why? Now, the fact that modes of travel, and I'm using that phrase for a reason, search that in Ellen White's writings, modes of travel. But most notably, why that's important is because of wrong-way drivers. The spike, apparently, in fatalities on the highways are because more and more people are driving the wrong way. Now, with all the signs, it seems impossible to me, as a driver of many, many years and many, many, many miles, how you could get on the wrong side of the highway. It seems pretty easy to get on the right side of the highway. But what AAA found is that there are two reasons why there's a spike in wrong-way drivers. Number one, alcohol. That's kind of common sense. But the use of alcohol is spiking in these years, in these dark times, in these stressful years, especially in 2020, right? But alcohol use is being abused more and more. But the second reason is really eye-opening: loneliness. The survey discovered that 87% of wrong-way drivers have been alone. So only 13% of wrong-way drivers have been with someone else. 87% of wrong-way drivers have been alone. And AAA is supposing that when we're alone, people are more and more stressed in this day. People are not emotionally well, emotionally healthy. And more people are getting lost in their thoughts. They're not paying attention as they drive. And mental health is a crisis, and we're seeing that in the United States of America on our highways. We really are searching for the peace and the stress relief and the rest that is found only in Jesus Christ. Also, Australia has been was pounded by fires last year, and this year it's the opposite. This year is being pounded by flooding in what's being called the once in 100 years type of an event. The nation has seen floodwaters rise higher than homes in many places. It's really being hit hard by flooding. It's not just in Australia either. Flooding is also striking Nashville, Tennessee this week, killing 4 so far. You know, it's strange for this time of year to have flooding, flash flooding especially, because it's the end of winter. And especially this time of year in Nashville, Tennessee, according to what I read. But what's interesting is that Nashville, Tennessee has been in the news a lot of recent, especially in the last few months. And I don't have the time to get into it right here, right now, but there's actually a prophetic reason why Nashville is been in the news. And I encourage you to try to find more information on that as well. But flooding in Nashville it's like flooding in a diverse place, right? Earthquakes in diverse places. Doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be happening, but it's happening nonetheless. Tornadoes in 2021 are already attacking the southeast, and it's supposed to be much, much worse as the year progresses. From just in 3 days, from March 16th through March 18th, in 3 days, 48 tornadoes touched ground and did damage in the southeast. 48 in 3 days. That's incredible. Meteorologists are saying this is due to La Nina type weather patterns, and this year is being forecasted as likely the deadliest and costliest in American history. They're saying it'll either match or be worse than 2011, which was notable because of the Joplin, Missouri tornado that lasted 38 minutes long and ended up doing $2.8 billion of damage. It's incredible. And they're saying 2021 should be equal to or worse. So if you're in the southeast, be careful and prayerful that the angels of God will hold back the winds of strife. Also, a book was published this month. I want to spend a few moments on this, in which the book is a conversation with Pope Francis about the current conditions of the world. And then, of course, his formula, his solution to changing that. The book is entitled, of course, this is, I believe that's Italian. I know I'm an Italian, I should know. That looks Italian to me. But the book is entitled God and the World to Come. And the Pope discusses how we can save our culture, how we can save our world, how we can change things. And here's at the very basis of it, his formula. Notice what he says, how we can save our world. It says the path to humanity's salvation passes through the creation of a new model of development, which unquestionably focuses on coexistence among peoples in harmony with creation. So he's not stating we need an old model, the Bible's model. He's saying we need to come up with a new model for human salvation. Now, I understand he's not speaking of spiritual salvation, but nonetheless, salvation, even if it is societal salvation, love and peace, it comes through who? Through Jesus Christ. But he's saying we need to create a new model which should focus unquestionably on how we treat one another and how we treat creation. Now, it's a decently good point. We should focus on how we treat one another. We should focus on creation. By the way, that's Sabbath language, isn't it? But we've noticed that the Pope has been very outspoken recently about putting the human at the center. That humanity is in charge of what we do. That humanity can save itself. And he has removed Christ from the center. He has put how we treat each other as the key issue. Now, just in case you think I'm overreaching or misquoting him or maybe mistranslating what he's saying, let's keep reading. Notice what he says next. He says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment more important than this one. Jesus says to the disciples, and he quotes Mark 12:31. Hello? Are you catching what he's saying here? He said there's no more important commandment than this one. That this one is the one of all of them. This is numeral uno, right? The human at the center. This is the most important commandment according to Jesus. He's saying according to Jesus. Well, let's actually go back and see what Jesus said here. Let's get Mark 12 starting at verse 30, then we'll get to 31. Jesus says, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. So what's the first commandment that there's nothing more supreme over? Love God. Then in verse 31, and the second, and he literally calls it the second. And the second like it is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Plural. Love God, love others. You know, what Jesus is saying is that you can't really love others unless you also love God. That loving God is the foundation. It is the primary one, and this one is hanging off of it. It is just as important. They're equal. I believe they're equal. But that it's founded on, if you love God, you will love others. The Pope is saying the most important one, and he's denying the existence of the other one. He said there is no commandment other than this, right? Isn't that what he said? Let's go back. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment more important than this one, singular, Jesus says to his disciples. But Jesus said, these commandments, love God, love others. He's literally saying, remove God. God doesn't exist. Loving God, not there. Love man, love man, love man, love each other. He's denying that the first commandment of loving God is even in existence. He said, Jesus said it was the one, love one another, the one. This is the spirit of Antichrist. And we've noticed this over and over and over and over. They're removing Jesus and putting the human at the center. I really wish I had more time to discuss the next item as well. By the way, I should mention I've got a link down below with more quotes from the book if you would like to check that out, though. But this next item, I wish I had more time to discuss because it's actually pretty interesting. But people are concerned in 2021 about the prophecies of Nostradamus. And I wish people would just stick to the actual true prophecies of the Bible. But nonetheless, the world is concerned about what Nostradamus said. Now, the thing about Nostradamus is that he was sometimes right-ish. And I have another presentation I did one time about Nostradamus. You know, it's all about how you interpret what he says. But if you interpret a certain way, sometimes he gets it right on the head, right? He hits the nail right on the head. But even sometimes he's way wrong. The opposite happens. I mean, sometimes it's just not true at all. And I don't mean how you interpret it, but sometimes every interpretation of it is just wildly wrong. Things he says about a country or a year or a time, whatever. And so he's I like to say he's a 50-50 coin flip. But a true prophet of God is always right, every single time. And that's actually one of the steps of recognizing if a prophet is a true prophet, is that what they say comes to pass. Every single time the Bible, true prophets are going to be in accordance with the Bible and perfectly correct every single time, even in the details. Nostradamus is 50-50-ish or whatever. I don't know the actual percentages, but I'd like to say he's 50-50. However, people are noticing that he had a lot to say about this very year, 2021. In fact, here's a tweet about it. It says, Nostradamus predicted a zombie apocalypse, a meteorite hit, rising water levels, and a massive earthquake for 2021. We may not want to leave 2020 just yet. You know, and he's being a little playful, and many others are being a little playful, but there is actually a growing movement of, bad things are coming in 2021 because Nostradamus said it. We shouldn't be focused on what a false prophet said, but what the true prophecies are. The world is so interested in what Nostradamus said that the CDC, yes, the actual government agency, the Center for Disease Control, has built an entire campaign around what Nostradamus said. Now, I want to be clear. What the CDC is doing is actually just trying to advertise preparedness, to be prepared for any kind of emergency. And they're using the theme of zombie apocalypse that that Nostradamus talked about as just a way to advertise it. It's actually a genius way to advertise it. It's actually interesting because you want to find ways to advertise important messages that the world will listen to. In fact, I did a series one time on a zombie apocalypse all about the millennium. And the end of the millennium, when the wicked dead are raised, undead. And they still have all kinds of issues, but they're coming to judgment. It's a whole topic for another day. So it's actually a genius move by the CDC, but I just find it so interesting that people are so interested in what Nostradamus said. Here's a part of their new preparedness plan, showing a zombie kind of looking over the blanket. Get a kit, make a plan, be prepared. People are so interested in the zombie apocalypse, not only because of the Walking Dead show, but because of what Nostradamus said, that the CDC is even jumping on board. I've got a link down below to their whole page on zombie apocalypse preparedness, which again, I'm wanting to be clear, they're not literally saying it's going to happen. They're using it to tell people, hey, you've got to be prepared for all kinds of emergencies, and using links to other spots like how to be prepared for pandemic or earthquakes or other kinds of things as well. Okay, let's move on to our last two main topics, and let's start with signs in the sky. Okay, we've been talking about that quite a bit, and I want you to check out this video from the Pacific Northwest.
Wait, what's going on?
I don't know.
Are you kidding me?
Is that like a what?
That's more than a comment.
That's insane. Mom, are we okay?
Yes, that was amazing. Oh my. Wow.
A bunch of little things.
What the heck?
See it? Look at that. Whole bunch of lights. Jeez.
I've never seen anything like that.
Anything like that either.
What is that?
You don't know. It's heading down or out?
What am I seeing?
Okay, we've been noticing over the last few months, over the last year, that many crazy and even very cool things are taking place in our sky. And we've noticed that, a lot of them are just normal events. There's some mysteries, plenty of mysteries. We've talked about a lot of mysteries. But even just regular cool events. And in this case, it wasn't a mystery. It wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't a meteorite. Turns out it was a Falcon 9 space rocket which had broken apart in a re-entry bid. The more interesting thing, though, is just how many of these events are taking place. Just constant reasons to keep our eyes up, keep our eyes up, keep our eyes up. Just as we've noticed Jesus said, there will be signs in the heavens. And as we're warned about in Revelation 13, there will be signs in the heavens as well. And on that topic, we're getting closer and closer now to the reports of the Intelligence Committee to Congress and to the public concerning what the government knows about UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, right? And so we noticed already in this series that part of the stimulus was that they had to come out and say, okay, here's why so many of these things are happening. Here's what we know about aliens, UFOs, UAPs, etc. So we've described that and discussed that in great detail. And you can grab some past episodes if you want more knowledge about that, if you've missed past episodes, and there's a link down below for that. But here in March, John Ratcliffe, the former director of national intelligence, was interviewed, and here's what he said. Notice what he said here. He said, frankly, there are a lot more sightings than are made public. So what the government knows is much more than what we know. Some of those have been declassified that, frankly, engage in actions that are difficult to explain. He goes on, movements that are hard to replicate or that we don't have the technology for, or traveling at speeds that exceed the sound barrier without the sonic boom. So he's saying many things are happening that we can't really explain. And he goes on to explain that the first goal, typically, of the national intelligence community is to find a plausible explanation. Okay, either that's a weather-related thing, or maybe something another country is doing. They try to find a plausible a plausible explanation. But he says that there are many things that can't be explained, that are just unexplainable. And he promises that he'll go into more detail when this information is given and declassified. And that's supposed to be sometime this summer. The world is getting more and more ready to accept that false angel of light, isn't it? The last main item that I want to discuss today before we close, it really deserves our contemplation. The terrible events which took place this month in Atlanta and in Boulder. In Atlanta, we saw 8 people needlessly killed in 3 different spas. 6 of those 8 were Asian American women. And the suspected motive, I know people are arguing about the motive and what is right, what is wrong, what is racism, what is sexual shaming, sex job shaming. But I'm just going to report that the suspected motive so far is it's a sexual addiction that this killer felt he was tortured with. And so he was trying to hurt those in that field. Then, of course, just a few days later, another killer entered a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado, opening fire, killing 10, including a law enforcement officer. And I likely don't need to take any time to go over the details of those stories with you because they've been in the news so much. And they're horrible travesties and could be prevented. And we really do need answers. But here's why I want to discuss it in terms of our prophetic forecast. We've discussed already that lawlessness is abounding. Love is growing cold. What's happening in our world is a result of sin. The winds of strife are being let loose. The loss of the Holy Spirit is being felt upon the minds and the hearts of the world. All of these pertain to these disgusting events in Atlanta and in Boulder. But then our world is using these events to argue over gun rights and the Second Amendment. One side says, we need guns. See, there's murderers out there. We need guns. The other side says, innocent people are dying because of guns. And then they argue back and forth and they fight over semantics. And really, honestly, biblically here, it's just those arguments are a distraction because they're the effect of the real problem. And as we argue over, B or C and D, we're ignoring A, the real cause of this issue. I want you to think of it this way. Let's take one side of the argument. We need guns. Well, why do we need guns? Because the world no longer sees value in each other, in what the Creator has given us. The world no longer sees value in the creation of the Creator. What we need is a revival of creation theology. We need our Creator. So let's look at the other side. People are dying. Innocent people are dying. That's true. Why are innocent people dying? Isn't the answer the same? People need Jesus. The world needs a focus back on the value of our Creator and what He has done in creating our planet. Jesus is the answer, and there's a special focus on Jesus as our Creator in the last days. Family, I want you to see what the world is crying out for at the beginning. We're going to really come full circle now as we start to wrap up. What the world has been saying is, we need a Sabbath, we need a Sabbath, we need a Sabbath. God gave us a Sabbath. And as people cling more and more to man's Sabbath, it's not fixing the problem. It's not fixing the issue. Things are getting worse, aren't they? I want you to notice what Ezekiel 20 verse 12 says about the real Sabbath. God is speaking. He says, moreover, I also gave them my Sabbaths. They're His day. Not man's day, not our day. His day given to us. to be a sign, a connection between them, creation, and me, Creator, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. We have lost that connection to our Creator, and therefore this world no longer cares about the creation. Going back to those two great commandments, we need to love the Lord and love one another. We cannot love one another without first loving the Lord. We have a higher calling as Christians. We've been chosen by God to be sanctified, to be perfected in His love. He wants to sanctify us the way He has sanctified the Sabbath. He wants to set us aside for a holy and perfect purpose and work. Don't be yourself. So much of this world is focused on be yourself, be yourself. Don't be yourself. Be what God wants you to be. Let Him mold you and shape you, because He is the Creator. And it's literally, I know we've talked about this verse before, but it's literally what Revelation tells us to focus on God as. Revelation 14:7, saying with a loud voice, fear God, love God, and give glory to Him. For the hour of His judgment has come. The last days have come. We should love God. Why? Worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. The world is saying, we need a Sabbath, we need a Sabbath, we need a Sabbath, we need to take care of each other. But they're trying to do it without the real Sabbath, without the real Creator of the Sabbath, without the real Creator of us all, without Jesus Christ at the center. And it's vanity. It's worthless. It's like grasping the wind, right? People need Jesus. So I want to encourage you. Let people know about Jesus. Let people know about Jesus. Let's stay focused on the things as they unfold, but stay vigilant about the things as they unfold. But we got to keep our eyes upon Jesus. Keep our eyes upon prophecy. Keep our eyes upon the revelation of Jesus Christ, and see what He has in store for you today.